Hi, everybody. Mrs. Moshfegh is my mom. I'm not. I would be Ms., whatever. Thank you so much, Ruth. So I guess I'm going to read to you a little bit from the novel, and I think we're going to have a translation. Okay, great. In addition to what's been said about this novel, My Year of Rest and Relaxation, I'll just say that it is a book whose exposition is sort of cyclical. We see this woman going to sleep, waking up, going back to sleep, and waking up. In the course of the first few chapters, she quits her job in order to take on the full-time job of sleeping. But she's quite often interrupted by her one and only friend, Riva, who is sort of her alter ego in a way. She's definitely her own individual person, but they are the protagonist, who has no name, and this friend, Riva, have an interesting rapport. So I actually haven't read out loud from this section of the book, I think, ever, so this will be interesting. And as you know, Dr. Tuttle is her totally insane psychiatrist. So, does everyone know what Jose Cuervo is? Okay, it's tequila. Does everyone know what Diet Mountain Dew is? Okay, it's really disgusting soda. Okay. The next day, Riva came over to whine about her dying mother and prattle on about Ken. Ken is Riva's boss, with whom she's having an affair. Riva's drinking seemed to be getting worse that summer. She pulled out a bottle of Jose Cuervo and a can of Diet Mountain Dew from her huge new lime green alligator skin knockoff Gucci tote. Want some tequila? Riva asked. I shook my head no. Riva had an interesting method of mixing her drinks. After each sip of Diet Mountain Dew, she'd pour a little Jose Cuervo into the can to take up the space her sip had displaced, so that by the time she finished, she was drinking straight tequila. It was fascinating to me. I caught myself imagining the ratio of Diet Mountain Dew to Jose Cuervo in that can, what the formula would be to measure it sip by sip. I'd studied Zeno's paradox in high school algebra, but never fully understood it. Infinite divisibility, the theory of halving, whatever it was. That philosophical quandary was exactly the kind of thing Trevor would have loved to explain to me. He'd sit across from me at dinner, slurping his ice water, muttering fluently about fractions of cents and the fluctuating price of oil, for example, all while his eyes scanned the room behind me, as though to affirm to me that I was stupid, I was boring. Someone far better might be getting up from a table to go powder her nose. The thought stung. I still couldn't accept that Trevor was a loser and a moron. I didn't want to believe that I could have degraded myself for someone who didn't deserve it. I was still stuck on that bit of vanity, but I was determined to sleep it away. You're still obsessed with Trevor, aren't you? Riva said, slurping from her can. I think I have a tumor, I replied, in my brain. Forget Trevor, Riva said. You'll meet someone better if you ever leave your apartment. She sipped and poured and went on about how it's all about your attitude and that positive thinking is more powerful than negative thinking, even in equal amounts. She'd recently read a book called How to Attract the Man of Your Dreams Using Self-Hypnosis. And so she went on to explain to me the difference between wish fulfillment and manifesting your reality. I tried not to listen. Your problem is that you're passive, Riva said. You wait around for things to change, and they never will. That must be a painful way to live. Very disempowering, she said, and burped. I had taken some Risperdal. I was feeling woozy. Have you ever heard the expression, eat shit or die? I asked. Riva unscrewed the tequila and poured more into her can. It's eat shit and die, she said. We didn't talk for a while. My mind drifted back to Trevor, the way he unbuttoned his shirts and pulled at his tie, the gray drapes in his bedroom, the flare of his nostrils in the mirror when he clipped his nose hairs, the smell of his aftershave. I was grateful when Riva broke the silence. Well, will you come out for drinks on Saturday at least? It's my birthday. I can't, Riva, I said. I'm sorry. I'm telling people to meet up at Skinny Kitty at 9-ish. I'm sure you'll have a better time if I'm not there to bum you out, I said. Don't be that way, Riva crooned drunkenly. Soon we'll be old and ugly. Life is short, you know? Die young and leave a beautiful corpse. Who said that? Someone who liked fucking corpses. Riva was only a week older than me. On August 20th, 2000, I turned 27 in my apartment in a medicated haze, smoking stale menthols on the toilet and reading an old architectural digest. At some point, I fumbled in my makeup drawer for eyeliner to circle things on the pages that I found appealing, the blank corners of rooms, the sharp glass crystals hanging from a chandelier. I heard my cell phone ring, but I didn't answer it. Happy birthday, Riva said in her message. I love you. As summer dwindled, my sleep got thin and empty, like a room with white walls and tepid air conditioning. If I dreamt at all, I dreamt that I was lying in bed. It felt superficial, even boring at times. I'd take a few extra Risperdal and Ambien when I got antsy, thinking about my past. I tried not to think of Trevor. I deleted Riva's messages without listening to them. I watched Air Force One 12 times on mute. I tried to put everything out of my mind. Valium helped, Ativan helped, chewable melatonin and Benadryl and NyQuil and Lunesta and temazepam helped. My visit to Dr. Tuttle in September was also banal. Besides the sweltering heat, I suffered walking from my building into a cab and from the cab into Dr. Tuttle's office. I felt almost nothing. I wasn't anxious or despondent or resentful or terrified. How are you feeling? Dr. Tuttle asked. I stood and pondered the question for 5 minutes while Dr. Tuttle went around her office, turning on an arsenal of fans, all the same make and model, 2 installed on the radiator under the windows, 1 on her desk, and 2 in the corners of the room on the floor. She was impressively nimble. She no longer wore her neck brace. When we first meet Dr. Tuttle, she's wearing this neck brace like this. Anyway, I'm fine, I think, I yelled blandly over the roaring hum. You look pale, Dr. Tuttle remarked. I've been keeping out of the sun, I told her. Good thing, sun exposure promotes cellular collapse, but nobody wants to talk about that. She herself was a piglety shade of pink. She wore a straw-colored sack of a dress that looked like coarse linen. Her hair was at a high frizz. A tight, chunky strand of pearls rolled up and down her throat as she spoke. The fans stirred up a roar of wind and made me dizzy. I gripped the bookshelf, knocking a swollen copy of Apparent Death to the floor. Sorry, I yelled over the din and picked it up. An interesting book about possums. Animals have so much wisdom. Dr. Tuttle paused. I hope you're not a vegetarian, she said, lowering her glasses. I'm not. That's a relief. Now, tell me how you feel. Your affect is very flat today, Dr. Tuttle said. She was right. I could barely arouse the enthusiasm to stand up straight. Have you been taking your Risperdal? I skipped yesterday. I was so busy at work, I just forgot. The insomnia is really bad these days, I lied. You're exhausted, plain and simple. She scribbled on her prescription pad. According to that book you're holding, the death gene is passed from mother to child in the birth canal. Something about microdermabrasions and infectious vaginal rash. Does your mother exhibit any signs of hormonal abnormalities? I don't think so. You might want to ask her. If you are a carrier, I can suggest something for you, an herbal lotion, only if you want it. I'd have to order it special from Peru. I was born cesarean, in case that's a factor, I said. The noble method, she said. Ask her anyway. Her answer might shed some light on your mental and biorhythmic incapacities. Well, she's dead, I reminded her. Dr. Tuttle put her pen down and folded her hands into prayer. I thought she was going to sing a song or do some incantation. I didn't expect her to offer me any pity or sympathy, but instead she squinched up her face, sneezed violently, turned to wipe her face with a huge bath towel lying on the floor by her desk chair, and scribbled on her pad some more. And how did she die? She asked. Not pineal failure, I suppose. She mixed alcohol with sedatives, I said. I was too lethargic to lie. And if Dr. Tuttle had forgotten what I'd told her, and if Dr. Tuttle had forgotten that I'd told her my mother had slit her wrists, telling her the truth wouldn't matter in the long run. People like your mother, Dr. Tuttle replied, shaking her head, give psychotropic medication a bad reputation. Okay, I'll end there.
You took that part to get us in the mood. Because if we would explain, or if I would let you explain what the book is about and how it is built and stuff like that, then people might think it's a very, that it's only a very depressing book. And it's not, it's a very funny book.
Yeah, I forget that sometimes.
That it's funny?
Yeah.
How come you forget that?
I think because I don't read the book, I just talk to people about it.
And they never say it's funny?
No. So thank you, Ruth.
It's strikingly funny. And I think it's very important and crucial to the book that it's funny.
Yeah, it is important. Mm-hmm.
But that's not easy, to make something, to write something funny.
Well, I think it's probably easier to write something funny than to write something really serious.
For you?
I think just period, plain and simple. Because if you're trying to be so serious, you end up being totally absurd, which I think is funny.
Wait, so did you try to write a very, very serious book and it ended up funny by accident?
I think when I started writing, I was completely serious. And then I realized that there was no point in being serious, because if you take yourself too seriously, it's funny. So I just leaned into being funny.
And that's
not in this book. I mean, like when I first started writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. You just lean in, and then it happens. Being funny.
I just let it. I let the characters be funny. Yeah.
It was given to you by birth, maybe. To be funny.
I don't know. Actually, my family isn't that funny.
Do they think your books are funny?
I have no idea.
You have no idea? They don't read your books?
My sister read this book, and I said, well, what did you think? Or I don't even know if I asked her what she thought. She said, it should come with a warning label. And then I said, well, it does. My name is on it. And she thought that was funny.
It is. The humor makes it even more real. Is that what we're trying to say here?
I hope so. I hope so, because I think if something is too austere, it's really hard to enter into it. And hopefully the comedy kind of makes you a little bit more relaxed.
Yeah, Dr. Tuttle is extremely funny, but it's also very, I don't know what the exact word would be, but it's, I mean, the main character, because she doesn't have a name, finds her in the yellow pages. It's too easy. It's like she's an exaggeration of what really is going on with a lot of psychiatrists, isn't it? You just ask for a prescription and that's it.
Yeah, I don't think that's an exaggeration at all. Yeah, I mean, I think what's unusual about Dr. Tuttle is that she's actually really kooky.
What is kooky? What
kooky, like she's funny and she's weird. Yeah. I mean, I think most psychiatrists are just like machines. They don't emit much, right? Because if they were too organic as people, they couldn't really do their job. So I think she, and she's also sort of observant in her very limited way, which I think is kind of special. And she's very dedicated.
Is she dedicated?
I think she's very dedicated to her job. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. If we forget what a real or a good psychiatrist would do.
No, we're not talking about good psychiatry.
No. She's dedicated to giving loads of prescriptions.
She's dedicated to the project of helping this woman sleep, who's lying to her and telling her that she's not. So, yeah.
Why does this woman wants to sleep for a year?
Well, she has this theory that if she can sleep for long enough, her cells will have regenerated however number of times it would take for them to forget their memory, or whatever is stored cellular memory, and that even she would forget who she was so that she could be reborn at the end of this year of sleep. And a lot of the book is the story of how she arrived at that idea and why. And we learn, very quickly, just from that scene, we know her mother killed herself. And early on in the book, we hear that the mother killed herself very shortly after the father died of an illness, and that happened when the protagonist was in the middle of college, and she's an only child. So she's all alone.
She's all alone.
Yeah, she's an orphan. And she's orphaned at a time where she had just left home anyway. And in the course of the novel, we also learn that she didn't really have a loving relationship with her parents to begin with. So she has been alone, and now she's the most alone. So,
is this the author speaking, or is this the main character speaking? Does she know this?
I think she knows. I think she knows that she doesn't like what's left in her mind. Life has made a bad impression on her, so she would like to erase it and start over.
At what point did the idea come to you? I'm gonna let a main character of a book sleep for a year, because that's quite a risk.
I guess I was naive and I did not understand that it would be a risk, but I knew that the book had to be in past tense. Otherwise, there would be just a lot of blank pages while she was sleeping. So,
and it would take us a year to read it.
Right?
Yeah.
So automatically, I knew that the storytelling had to be retrospective, and that allowed for a structure of narrative where I could jump from the present moment back to the past, to the deep past, to a dream, to an idea, to a reflection, to a judgment, back to the present. So it was I mean, I think that's the great thing about past tense. When you're writing in the first person, you can kind of go anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the structure was really central to the novel.
Yeah.
Without the structure, it wouldn't be there.
It would be really boring.
Yeah. Yeah, but at the same time, it's not like you're avoiding writing about what it's like to sleep, what it's like to take the pills again and again and again, and what the effect is.
I'm sorry, what was
Well,
the
that
question?
might be... I'll think of a question.
Okay.
That might be boring too, you know, to rephrase it and to go into that again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, it's rather circular also.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think that's not, that might be dodgy too.
Did you think it was dodgy?
No, how did
Oh.
you do that?
Oh, how did I make it
Yeah.
not dodgy?
That's the question. Thank you.
Well, I think what makes any narrative interesting is a character who wants something that's usually based on a delusion. Because, you know, if it was like a book about, I think I want a sip of water, you know, here's the book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking my hand and I'm going to get the glass and then I sip the water. The end of book.
Mm.
But if I want a sip of water, but it's the last water on earth, you know, and I now have to like figure out how to fight you all for this last sip of water. It's a more interesting story. So there has to be some kind of conflict, and I like conflict that is inner conflict.
Inner conflict. Okay.
So you know, she's fighting with herself in many ways.
She wants to change.
She wants to be changed.
That's
And
a
I
different
think,
thing.
yeah, I mean, I think that's what Riva criticizes her for. It's like, you're so passive.
Do something.
Yeah. There is something very passive about just sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
you know? It's the definition of passivity is lying inert, not doing anything. But actually what happens in the book is that sleep becomes a great adventure in some ways.
Yeah. So there's this unity of action, you
Yeah.
might say. You know, she wants to sleep. There's also this unity of space, because it's New York and it's her apartment, and it's, you know, it's limited to that, although you go back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
Is New York also a character in the book?
I think it is. And her relationship, the protagonist's relationship with New York, is an important relationship because she very rarely goes out and touches it, but it is part of her past and sort of the fabric of her life. She lives on the Upper East Side in a neighborhood which is really stuck up, basically. And she has a job in Chelsea, which is very stuck up also, working at a art gallery.
Which is very stuck up also.
Which is also very stuck up, yeah. And she's pretty uptight as well. I mean, when you really look at, this is a book about someone who is so uptight that, probably, okay, well, I'm not going to psychoanalyze her, but...
Please do.
Well, I think that what she really needs is, like, to get out of the city and, like, go roll around with some pigs or something.
Why?
You know?
Why is that so important? Has she become the city, almost?
I think
or like a symbol of the city?
I think she's just become hyper-civilized. And her parents were, her father was a scientist, which, you know, nothing against scientists, but he wasn't the warmest fellow. And her mom was a drunk. And so the protagonist, it's annoying that she doesn't have a name, I'm just gonna say that. The protagonist doesn't have great faculties with feeling. I mean, she's really disconnected from her emotions. She can have memories and she can kind of try to have emotions, but she's so detached, which is a good skill to have if you need it. but she's so detached that I think that she becomes detached from reality. So when I say that, you know, she probably needs to go roll around with some pigs in the mud, it's like she needs to have a visceral experience that is close to Earth, you know? But instead, she has a psychic experience, which is in outer space.
Yeah. You say she's detached from reality.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your characters also in a collection of stories are, in a way, I wouldn't use the word lonely, because loneliness in New York, that's maybe too easy, but alienated.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they don't live in New York, they have a difficult relation towards, you know, life, real life. Is alienation a good term to talk about a lot of your characters?
I think so. It's hard to pick the right word, I think, because yeah, loneliness is a little bit like
too easy,
sentimental.
Okay. Yeah.
Alienated implies that there are non-aliens who are subjecting her to alienation, or her or any character, but I actually think that everyone is an alien. So it's not just that the character in a story is alienated, it's just a sense of alienation, a sense of being separate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we all aliens?
Yeah, I think we're all aliens because we all have our own subjective consciousness.
Okay. Can I quote you? It's out of one of the stories. I loved it, someone says, or at least I thought I ought to love it.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been very clear on that distinction.
Mm-hmm.
That's also given me an idea of what your characters are usually like. Like, okay, is this real? Is it not real? How can I get into the world and touch it even?
Mm-hmm.
That alienation, you say, okay, everybody is an alien.
Mm-hmm.
In its own way. It's terrifying. Isn't
Why?
it terrifying?
Why?
Well, to not be sure if you really love something or if it's just that you ought to do it, that terrifies me.
Well, what if we're talking about chocolate?
There would be no doubt at all. No, we're talking about the inner things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember what that quote is from.
Oh.
What is it? When the narrator says, I loved it, or at least I thought I loved
Maybe
it.
the furniture.
I loved it.
Oh, there we are. Good. A dark and winding road.
Oh, right.
My parents kept a small cabin in the... Okay, so this is a male character who goes up to a cabin and who doesn't really know whether he loves it or not.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I think in that circumstance, his family is saying, here's the special thing.
You should love it.
You should love it. And so he grew up thinking, oh, I love it. I love it. I mean, and it's something like we say we love things all the time that we don't actually love. I mean, it's like, you know, hate is a strong word. I mean, I don't know if they say that here, but it's like in the United States, like, oh, hate, it's like what you would say to a child. I hate you. Hate is a very strong word. But actually, love is a very strong word too. And we throw it around like it's nothing. Or like, I love these chairs. You know what I mean? I don't actually love them. I just really like them, you know?
Like Riva said to the protagonist on the phone, I love you.
I love you. But I think Riva really means it. I think Riva genuinely loves the protagonist.
Is she less alienated than the protagonist? Why doesn't she have a name?
What would have been a good name? Like, this was the problem. Like, I wrote it from the first person, so she doesn't have to name herself, because I don't say, Ottessa, la la la. Like, she doesn't have to ever name herself. And then when I believe in naming your characters, I absolutely do. And
Riva is no coincidence.
Yeah. When it came to deciding what I should name the protagonist, there was no right name. Like, I really tried. And she doesn't have a name. She would never identify herself.
Now that's alienation.
Yeah.
But you weren't thinking of going to other continents, talking about your book and not being able to.
I know. I just have to say the protagonist.
Yeah.
I should have just called it The Protagonist.
Are you used to that already, to go to other continents and talk about your book and readers showing up and loving your work?
Not that much. Not that much. I mean, I have way more experience speaking to American readers. I've talked in Germany about Eileen, and I've been to the UK a bunch of times with the different books, but I've never been to Belgium in this capacity.
How does it feel that people from different parts of the world read your stuff?
It's crazy. It's totally crazy. I mean, there's like a translation of Eileen in Korean.
Big audience.
Totally blows my mind. I can't believe it. I can't believe you're here. Like, what are you doing here? Yeah, it's really amazing.
But it feels good, or is it terrifying?
No, it's not terrifying.
It
feels good.
Yeah. Was it what you wanted when you started writing?
Like, did I write thinking like, oh, one day my book will be in Dutch?
I'll go to Brussels.
Right, one day I'll go to Brussels. No, not at all. Although I wrote a large part of my year of rest and relaxation when I was in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in Paris writing, I wrote a completely incorrect version of the book. So I ended up having to delete it all.
And what do you mean by incorrect?
I mean, it was like the story changed. The story was, instead of this character staying in New York, she wakes up on a plane and she doesn't know where she's going. And so I sort of had that idea and I wrote it out for 200 pages. And then when I got back to California, I was like, oh, that was a big mistake. But it was okay because I got to know my character.
Yeah, because she wants to get away from something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've had New York, we've had The Sleep, the unity of time. Well, time. Yeah, that's not a coincidence. It's set in the year 2000.
Yep.
Where everything changes in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Was it important that it was that specific moment? Well, yeah, leading up to 2001, of course, but...
Yeah, it was. It was, and it's a little bit like tricky to extricate my reasons for setting the book in that year, because some of it was instinctual, some of it was accidental, and then some of it just felt really kind of fated. I didn't realize that I had set the book in the year preceding 9/11 until I was working on the sections of the novel that had to do with the art gallery.
Okay.
And I had so much fun writing those sections because the art in the gallery is so ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And as I was writing, I was like, well, what could be more ridiculous? And I realized that I was basically parodying the art, like art in New York City in the year 2000.
Okay.
Like, it wasn't actually that far off from what was there. I mean, like Damien Hirst and, it was...
Those guys.
Those guys.
I love those guys. Yeah,
I think there was some... I mean, I'm really not an art historian, although my protagonist is. But there was something happening in New York, I think, like the New York art scene seemed to be reaching like the peak of absurdism because there was so much excess. Like, the 90s, like not everyone, people had money. Okay. People had extra money. So I think that that got reflected in culture in a lot of ways, in excess. So like having totally ridiculous art for, you know, $500,000 in your foyer was like kind of cool. Whereas now it would be very tacky, even though people still do it. But that's just to save taxes, save money on taxes. I mean, but there was, yeah, style was different. Politics were different. The city was different. So
Has the city changed a lot?
I think the city has changed a lot. I was, in 2000, I was 18 or 19 years old, and I was a college student in Manhattan. And when I moved to New York, from the New York I moved to and the New York I moved away from 10 years later felt like a very different place. Like New York City in the late 90s still had that sort of grit and sense of like anything can happen, you know? There was a magic to the city. There was, it was very clear like what was the man and what was freedom. And then after 9/11, I think very quickly and very subtly, the city became much more like what we think of now as contemporary, like in terms of control and surveillance and corporate entities taking over independent establishments. You know, like you would see like a corner store that had been there for 100 years is now a Chase Bank, you know, especially in Manhattan. So, yeah, that kind of took the magic away in some ways. But I mean, New York is still New York. It's just a different place.
So you said that you weren't fully aware of maybe the symbolic year you were setting this story in. Now, of course, the book is there, and then if you read it, it almost feels like a statement, like, okay, the world was asleep until 2001, 9/11, and then we woke up, and it was, we all woke up, didn't we? Not just New York, like the whole world woke up. Is that also something that when everything fell together in your novel, you thought, oh, this is good?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the thing about it was like, yes. And also, we didn't wake up at all. Like, we like woke up into another dream. That it's like that thing. That they're like, what is it? What does it mean to really wake up? Wake up to truth? Like, there is no truth. And also, it's impossible to know when you found it. So, 9/11 happened, and I think it connected a lot of people to their mortality, which was beautiful in a lot of ways, but also it was like totally divisive. It separated people almost immediately politically, and terrified everyone. So on the one hand, we're more connected to our humanity. On the other hand, we're starting a war and we're terrified, and suddenly everything is a threat. So we don't trust ourselves and we don't trust other people. You know, like I think that like collective anxiety went up, like skyrocketed after 9/11 because, you know, if you it's traumatic. Like,
of course.
Why, like, getting into the metro is scary, you know, when you have something like a terrorist attack on your mind. What happens? I mean, it's not like particular to New York City.
We've been through it. Yeah. If it's from New York to the character and how she almost absorbs it as a protagonist or as a symbol of it, was it important that she was, contrary to a lot of other characters you've written about, that she was beautiful and successful? She had everything. And still things weren't working out. Was it fun to write from a perspective, for once, of someone who looked good and was successful?
I don't know. It wasn't more fun. I actually think it's more fun to write a character who is sort of steeped in their own physicality and troubles. But
the physicality is important,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she's rather disembodied, and she had to be. I mean, I think there are some really, I thought, like very sound, logical excuses to have this character look like a supermodel, and it was that if she was burdened with any superficial anxieties, it would force her more into her physical reality. So because she looks so perfect, it's almost like she's not real. And she doesn't have to contend with a lot of irritating distractions that come along with being a physical person, like her friend Riva does. Like Riva is like so irritated with her own physicality.
She wants to lose some weight.
Yeah, I mean, that's how it manifests. She wants to improve her physicality so that she'll feel better. But that couldn't be an option for the protagonist, or else she wouldn't slip so easily into hibernation. She would be too distracted by the
bodily
stuff.
Things.
Yeah.
The physicality of your characters is also one of the very striking things if you read your stories. After writing all these things, then, do you think of yourself as an author, of as a person? Why do I always write these physical things?
Like, do I question
yourself? Or your interests?
Well, my interests are changing. I mean, the book that came out recently, the short story collection, I wrote before my year of rest and relaxation. So if you're reading things in succession, it might seem like I went backwards a little bit. But I know I don't really question it, and I don't really look back. I have more things.
Which way is it going to?
I have a book coming out next spring in the States, which is about sort of a murder mystery. And then...
it's just funny how you say sort of a murder mystery.
Well, it's not exactly a murder mystery, so it's sort of a murder mystery. And
okay. I only believe you.
And the book I'm working on now, or should be working on now, but I'm not, is a book narrated by the ghost of a Chinese teenager who immigrates from Shanghai to San Francisco in the years right before the big San Francisco earthquake in 1906. She grows up in a very oppressed family. I mean, this is like early 20th century Shanghai. Her father works for like some foreign company. Anyway, she steals her brother's identity and has to pass as a man in order to gain passage on this ship to California, because it was during the Chinese Exclusion Act in the USA, which was a basically totally racist immigration policy there in order to prevent the Chinese people who are already there from procreating and becoming American. So women really, during certain periods, women weren't allowed, except that there was a pretty profitable sex trafficking industry that brought Chinese women to San Francisco, and also American women to Shanghai, because there were all these Europeans and Americans in Shanghai too. I mean, so anyway, I'm doing a lot of research about that, and like a quarter of the way through the book, and it's narrated by this girl, but she's been dead for 100 years. So it's sort of metaphysical. Yeah.
You said immediately a girl. Is the male-female theme important? Has it become more important to you?
Oh, well, I mean, I stress a girl because she's like 15.
She's young.
She's really young. The male-female thing. Well, I mean, I guess I am interested in her, like her having to perform maleness, and I haven't really gotten into that part of the book, so I don't know how I'm going to pull it off. Be careful. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I want to see. I mean, I want to see this really young woman learning how to act like a man, just for my own curiosity. I mean, I just think it would be interesting.
You said I should be working on it, and I'm not.
Yeah.
That felt as if, well, guilt is a strong word.
No.
Okay.
I'm not guilty. I'm just excited.
Yeah. So it's not that if you're not writing, you think I should be writing?
No. I mean, it's because I'm busy doing other things like this. Mm-hmm. So I feel no guilt for being here. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I miss the book. Like, I miss working on the book. So yeah, I should be doing it.
Is it a physical longing also to be writing?
It can be. I mean, in the way that you might miss a person, you know.
Is writing, when you're writing, is it something you suffer from? Is it an act that is dreaded, or that gives you pleasure?
I feel absolutely happy when I'm working.
Happy is a big word.
Yeah. I love it. I actually love it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't periods of anguish. But I love those too. They're fascinating and challenging, and yeah.
Is being a writer when you imagined that you might become a writer, and now you are, is it what you thought it would be?
I really had no conception of my future. I had no idea I had no idea what to expect. I mean, it's actually kind of disappointing to be an adult and knowing, like, I can kind of guess what the rest of my life is going to be like at this point, you know, like roughly. But when I was 9, who knew, you know? And that was fun. So no, I didn't. This is not what I expected. But at the same time, I can't imagine doing anything else, you know?
If you say now, I kind of know what the rest of my life will look like, well, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Does it scare you?
No, because I feel like actually I have a lot of agency in what I decide to do. I mean, I'm in an amazing position where I pick what my work is, you know? And my work is what I love. So if I'm ever bored, I'll just change my mind.
What did your sister say about the book?
She said it should come with a warning label.
Why would that be?
She said it was really depressing.
Is it depressing?
I don't know. She said that.
If you would be your sister, and you would read your sister's book, this book, would you think it's depressing?
Yeah. If I had
because you know your sister.
If I had a little sister, your little sister, who wrote that, I would be like, "Are you okay?"
Are you okay?
Yeah. I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She will be signing your books.